First, we have to discuss what the story of Poppy Playtime is, and if it can relate to anything currently in the FNAF world. What we know about the company that seems to be the main antagonist of Poppy Playtime series, called Playtime Co., is also basically the story of the game. They seemingly hit it big in the 1960s with the release of Poppy, the world's first truly intelligent toy. This Poppy doll put them on the map, marking them as the king of toys until dolls fell out of style in the late 70s, causing Playtime Co. to have to update their repertoire and come out with newer toys like Huggy Wuggy and Candy Cat, among others. This helped them bring back some of the business they lost, but this didn't seem to be enough. They soon began seemingly experimenting with more realistic dolls in an attempt to recreate Poppy's success, because let's face it, even if there was a truly intelligent version of Poppy, not every version of Poppy would be like that. Only the one they used in commercials and later we release at the end of that chapter, just like how ice cream in commercials is really mashed potatoes. Yeah, sorry. Sentient toys, however, are nothing new to FNAF, so William wouldn't really feel like a stranger. Of course, we also have to decide what version of William comes over. If it was William, Springtrap, Scraptrap, Burntrap, Glitchtrap, or maybe even Dave Miller, William's alias while he was on the run and underground in the Silver Eyes novel. Because the Springtrap personality or persona is very different to the William Afton persona. Springtrap is a very aggressive personality compared to William, who is sneaky and calculated as opposed to Springtrap's direct approach. So assuming that since this story revolves around people more than the toys, who are definitely instrumental but not as important like they would be in FNAF, in this case we would be going with William Afton specifically, because he needs to be able to sneak around and do villainous things, whereas Springtrap would likely just end up being a toy. Well, actually, if we think about it, maybe we can work two versions into this series. So, if Afton was in Poppy Playtime, he would probably just end up being a higher up at the company. Just because he doesn't seem like a man who sees living doll or truly intelligent doll and then doesn't do anything about it. Okay, look, if Afton's coming over, his story has to come over as well. It can't be just some random dude who's named William Afton. So he would have to have the story of wanting to bring his kids back. So, after hearing this, he would start at the company and eventually work his way up. By the time the actual game comes around, I'm guessing that he'd be pretty high up, like on the board of directors or shareholders or whoever it is at least. But I think that he wouldn't be CEO or close to that, because he doesn't seem like that type. He'd have worked his way up because he doesn't seem like the kind of person who likes working for other people, you know, like he likes to be in control. Hence why his targets for his crimes are kids, since they're easier to control. But this is where the issues come into play, since if we really want to know what would happen if Poppy Playtime was real, we need to think about what's happening in the games, with, you know, giant sentient toy monsters chasing us. Yeah, that part. Well, Hasbro is a $5.1 billion company, so I think it's safe to say that they care about making money. Not only that, but with Kenner products having been shut down, they could easily benefit from a way to get Kenner back on the map. Or at least something similar to Kenner. I'm not sure how reopening a company you shut down works in the US. Honestly, I don't even know how it works in Canada, so the US is an absolute mystery. But if Hasbro suddenly came out saying that they have the world's first truly intelligent toys, I don't think anyone would really care. But what about the giant humanitarian characters who want to eat us? And yes, I said humanitarian, not humanitarian, because humanitarian is something else, and I'm talking about someone who eats exclusively people. Although now I think about it, humanitarians also might just eat people. Well, either way, that would be a little more difficult to explain though. Although I think it's safe to say that they wouldn't be creating these monsters intentionally, since, you know, a family getting eaten by your toys not only cuts down on your client base, but also kind of gives your company a bad rep. Well, unless it's the FNAF universe, apparently. I think Hasbro would attempt to avoid this, but failures are inevitable in the pursuit of science, and honestly, they wouldn't really know about it until the first one came along. So how would they deal with those? Simple. I kind of explained it in that Bendy video. Yeah, they would simply pop a bullet between the eyes of the ones who didn't work properly. Those who weren't the ideal template, like Experiment 1006. Corporations and corporate America have a lot of shady dealings going down, even in real life, not just in movies. So offering a few failed experiments is nothing new, I'm sure. As my professor used to say when I was learning advertising in college, don't be afraid to kill off your babies. Not even kidding, that's the exact wording. What that means is, like, if something doesn't work, you gotta get rid of it even if it was your idea. Oh my god, Lori, you kinda scarred me, although it prepared me for FNAF. And I'm sure that the same philosophy of killing your babies is followed in the corporate world, although to a more extreme case in this scenario, because some of them might actually be babies. And while the science may be impossible to actually create human toys, I'm sure that if there was the technology, people would be using it. And this would probably be the result. So, is Poppy Playtime real? No, but if it was, should we be scared? Yes, and we should be scared without it, honestly. Because to quote Bill Nye, the world's on fucking fire. But it would be even worse if we had giant toys that came to want to eat us. Man, how would like the toy versus human war go? I kind of want to see that. Is that gonna be like chapter 7 of Poppy Playtime? Because like I want to fight some toys. I want to take the grab pack and make a fists and just shoot out giant fists at Huggy Wuggy. Because we know he's not dead. I hope he is, but we know he's not. He always comes back. Everyone always comes back. Real life toys, I feel like Hasbro might do it, but honestly, I think Disney would do it even more. Can you imagine, like, Disney turning their toys into people? If Disney had access to turn toys into people, they would turn the toys of their characters into people and then have them at the Disney parks. And then they would have their real characters. And then they could have even weirder characters than like just like the actual like humanoid characters. They could have like a real Jabba the Hutt. They could have a real Jabba the Hutt just like slithering. Does he slither, or he's like a slug, right? Like how do slugs count as like slithering? Is that what they do, or do they just slide? I don't know. It's like the immortal snail thing. Is he slithering? I don't think so. He's sliding that would hurt. Ow, Jesus. Okay, but yeah, no. Disney would absolutely do this. In a 10, Boxy Boo. Probably the biggest reveal in this game, and the most interesting way I've seen a new character or antagonist be revealed is Boxy Boo, who's the newest antagonist monster with a desire to just tear you apart while looking like an innocent giant jack-in-the-box. What's with these games and having giant monsters that are focused on like kid memory objects, right? Like a giant jack-in-the-box that will tear you limb from limb while they chase you around a toy factory, and a giant Thomas the Tank Engine knockoff that's pumped itself full of too much Stephen King that it started terrorizing an entire island. Well, no matter what, this is probably going to be the antagonist of chapter 3. I mean, I feel like that's kind of like the general consensus. And using the whole game to reveal that instead of just doing it in a trailer like they did with Mommy Longlegs was definitely a new approach. I mean, like, I get just doing it in a trailer, especially since this game is free, but it just seems odd until I remembered that since Mommy Longlegs hadn't been introduced previously, none of us really cared about the character when she was introduced in the trailer. So since Boxy Boo also wasn't established, maybe this game was them making the reveal for them in chapter 3 or possibly 4 more exciting in a way. And at 9, chapter 2. The trailer for the game that I didn't think came out before the game itself and just kind of popped up on Steam, and it's just kind of on the Steam page, also kind of sets some rules right away. Firstly, it establishes that this is the same facility as the one from the games by giving us the same scene from chapter 2's trailer. Well, okay, not like the same scene as in like the same shot from like top-down view of Huggy's toy, but the shot of Huggy on the ground in that pose. But this time around, instead it's Huggy on the ground in that pose where you can picture the camera being above him. But this time around, the green RE specialist picks it up, which is important, and I'll get to that in a minute. But then the toy reveals that it's also a monster, and green stomps the life out of it, which is something I think we all wanted to do. We know that this was in fact alive thanks to the blood that is left under its head after, it gets its skull stomped on. But this establishes a couple of things. One, that even the smaller toys sold by Playtime Co. are in fact humans, most likely the kids from the orphanage mentioned in Chapter 2. And two, that the Huggy we see Mommy grab at the beginning of the second chapter trailer is, as we figured, a toy. And that because of that, MatPat is probably right, thinking that she had to eat a lot of the toys in the building to keep herself going and keep herself sustained. So that's fun. I don't think MatPat likes me. I had this revelation this morning, and it ate grab pack changes. There's also some changes to the grab packs in this game, since the hands, at least in this game, are related to the RE specialist suits that you're in. If you're red, your hands are red. If you're blue, you have blue hands, etc. At least without customization. But this pulls into question what we are doing in the first game having to get different colored hands, because any RE specialist can complete any puzzle, but the buttons that you have to place your hand on to activate the minigames are green. By the logic of the main story games, we wouldn't be able to interact with those, and we would need the green RE specialist to actually activate any minigames, making them the most essential part of the team and a first priority for any decent monster. For anyone who's playing to win as the monster and not just try to have fun. Competitive online play would basically just become Protect Green, unless players could get green hands elsewhere, which is probably why they scrapped this rule for this game. But it's still an interesting discretion to point out when I need to fill out a top 10 list. You can also add cosmetics to your grab pack, like any free game trying to get your money, and I'm pretty sure that it has its own battle pass too, but you can have Mommy Long Leg be the reason your arms can extend, which is a whole other can of worms that I don't want to talk about. And it's 7 grab pack. The grab pack is certainly an interesting item. Used as in essence giant sticky hands, the first half of the grab pack is granted to us at the very beginning of the game and is a key mechanic in the game, being the main way to solve most of the game's puzzles. However, one of the big questions is why do we need this grab pack? Other than electricity puzzles, grabbing tape, and blocking progression, why are we limited to using this? It's almost as if we don't have any actual hands to use, but that raises the question, how are we able to use the grab pack if that was the case? Since we would normally just assume that we're just pulling triggers on some handles or something. But even before getting the grab pack, we don't see any of our body, not even our normal hands. And why is that? Well, maybe there's more of an explanation coming later on. And at 6, Poppy's a good guy. The first chapter of Poppy Playtime ends with us opening Poppy's display case with the lights flickering and her saying, "You opened my case," in what also seems to be an almost thankful tone. This is also something that MatPat mentioned in his game theory episode on the subject. This also relates to who Matt believes is behind Poppy, or I guess who Poppy really is, and that's Stella, a woman who is obsessed with trying to live forever and bringing joy to children like her toys did for her. And what better way to do that than being turned into a living toy? Well, there are actually plenty of ways that you could do that that don't involve having to convert your living flesh into a doll that talks to kids, but hey, it's an indie game. Plus, if Stella wanted to be a toy, she wouldn't be mad about being turned into one, she'd be delighted. And now, thanks to you opening her door, she can go and bring that joy to children. Or will she? Halfway through into number 5, Global Massacre. The idea that there is something bigger at stake here is another idea that's been floating around the internet. Thanks to the death line of "there are more lives at stake than just yours, wake up," which could also allude to Dream Theory, but I'm not touching that one with a top 10-foot pole. Get it? The Global Massacre idea started because, well, what else is going on to cause more lives to be at stake here other than toys actively trying to kill you? Plus, this only happens if you die and don't get rid of Huggy Wuggy at the end of the chapter. Since he bashes his head multiple times, I'm going to guess that they're definitely dead at this point. Plus, this thing is like 11 feet tall and definitely wants to go on a mass killing spree, with one section of the trailer suggesting that it just kills for fun and doesn't require sustenance. So what's the overall goal here? Well, we still don't know. With only one chapter out, we can't really gather all that much evidence, but alas, we're guessing anyway. Mostly because I wanted a break from FNAF, and this seems like something you'd all be into. And at 4, Poppy's hair. Poppy's hair is meant to smell like poppies because that's her name. However, poppies themselves don't really have much of a smell unless you're talking about the ones made for a certain kind of substance. Or the ones used to make a certain kind of substance, I should say. Those poppies are used for various illicit substances, however, they are also good at putting people to sleep. It was even used as a form of treatment when medicine wasn't really as advanced as it is today. So could this have been the point behind Poppy's hair? Could this doll have actively been selling to parents instead of their kids? If this doll was shown to be able to keep kids calm or put them to sleep, I'm sure a load of parents, especially in the 1960s when Poppy was invented, would have been down for it. Especially if the kids were like me. I literally at one point tried to run into traffic. I knew what adulthood would be like. And we know that the company behind Poppy and the others are certainly not the pinnacle of corporate decency. Definitely not setting the gold standard for how to treat their employees, so is it possible that they could have done this and not really cared about the consequences? It's an indie game. Absolutely. Getting close to the end to number 3, Among Us. Now is it just me or are the characters in this trailer looking hella sus, okay? Like I was half expecting this game to be based on Among Us or like Secret Neighbor instead of Dead by Daylight because of the design of the players in the trailer. Of course, it could be a reference to the game, just like the golden statue could be a reference to FNAF, but you cannot look at me and say that they do not look like Among Us crewmates. I was half expecting one of them to jump into a vent to try to escape Mommy Longlegs, and none of them make it out of the facility from what we can see in the trailer. So are they just like sending wave after wave of RE specialists in there just to have them all die? Or is this like you only get one shot situation? Because the answer is going to greatly alter the story of this game or the course of the story for the series depending, okay? If it's intended to have one, at least. It could also just be an easy way to release the game and stay relevant until Chapter 3 comes out, but I don't know. This could just be the Chapter 3 that we didn't expect, and it's all freaking Among Us, because we know we all love that game, and Red is never sus, and I am not salty about any of the games I've ever had, especially ones on this channel. Also, by the way, fun fact, this game is technically released under a different company. Like, this one is by Mob Games, with games in all caps, while Poppy Playtime and Poppy Playtime Chapter 2 is by Mob Games, with games only having a capital G. I don't know, some wouldn't think that it matters, but to Steam, it's a whole other company with its own page. If you didn't know, now you do. But ultimately, in at number 2, RES. The RES is the group we play as in Project Playtime when you are the survivors. The acronym stands for Resource Extraction Specialist, and is the reason I've been calling them like the Green RE Specialists, etc. But this name itself has some interesting implications, since this is more so like an aftermath thing instead of a like in the moment thing. Much like the Marvel Department of Damage Control, the Resource Extraction Specialists are seemingly trying to get whatever remaining salvageable materials are left from the facility after it's been taken over by the toys that we've been fighting against in the main game. The whole point of the survivors is to collect parts of a toy and assemble it. This is what they are completing all of the puzzles for. The puzzles basically acting like the generators in Dead by Daylight, and the toy being the escape zone, where you have to get all of them in order for it to unlock, but when there's only one RES remaining, they can all run to the train. Or not they all can, just the one person, because there's only one left. Much like in Dead by Daylight, when there's only one survivor, you can run to the exit. But the fact that they're trying to collect a giant toy seems like Playtime Co. is sending these guys in an effort to salvage whatever they can from their operation and potentially open under a new name and continue their mission, kind of like Defy Media. And they could also just be looking for a toy to reverse engineer the process from, or it could be another company altogether trying to find the secrets of Playtime Co. But them all having grab packs seems to indicate to me at least that this is an inside job. And finally, in at number 1, the Bigger Bodies Initiative. I wish this was a joke, but like any seemingly innocent spin-off game, there is of course a secret story with this one. You could say that it does in fact have hidden intent or purpose. Like with most Steam descriptions, typical categories within them, you know, like what is it, how to play, features. But the thing is, these sections aren't actually named to be sections. They're like blue subheadings, but the actual subheadings for the sections are actually messages to us. Can you hear us? Can you see this? Give us a sign. Those are the first 3. And by the end, we get a little bit more info with an entire block of text saying, quote, "The Bigger Bodies Initiative will fail. We will prevail. Stay alert. We will be in touch." Which is a total shift from the rest of the description. And I think I know exactly what this is. The final line of the actual game description is, "Won't you play fair?" But it starts glitching out, indicating that whoever this is has broken through and is sending us a proper message. The Bigger Bodies Initiative is a very interesting name game as well, and given that the RE specialists are trying to build a bigger toy, you'd think that this is what they meant, but instead, I think that these are big monsters. Huggy, Kissy, Mommy, Boxy, I don't think they were intentional. That wasn't something that Playtime Co. planned for, or that they were intentional, but whoever sent these specialists in is fighting against the monsters and believes that they will die off. Or maybe all of this is actually the prototype communicating with us, but we don't know because part 3 hasn't come out yet. But if you want to know as soon as it does, be sure you subscribe. And at 10, the cult. Whenever there is a case of a missing group of people in any game, not even just horror games, the classic question of were they in a cult will be asked. And honestly, it seems like it could be possible in Poppy Playtime, just more unlikely than some other options. Even if those options are stranger, which is weird. But I do see a possibility where these workers ended up forming some sort of cult surrounding the perfect toy of Poppy before trying to recreate her success in other toys only to fail miserably. They would end up worshipping Poppy like a god if this was the case. And what do we see? We see a room built specifically for her in a glass case, with a huge Poppy painting around the front door. While yes, this would end up later having graffiti that said not to enter this room, this doesn't seem like the actions of a group that fears Poppy. Why not encase her in steel to make sure that she couldn't escape? Or why paint a giant Poppy around the door when you could just pull a Henry Emily and seal the room off? It doesn't make sense, unless, at least for a time, they worshipped her like a goddess. And at 9, death messages. The messages we get when Huggy Wuggy kills us are certainly interesting. They set the theorist's senses off instantly since there is certainly more going on here. With lines like "don't die just yet," "more lives are at risk than just yours," "it's too early to die," and "I need you alive," there are bound to be many questions just based on us dying. Like, who's talking to us? Are they resurrecting us or are we actually dead? And what the hell is actually going on here? These are all good questions, and most people assume that Poppy is the one who's talking to us during these death screens, but I'm not so sure if this is the case. It could simply be another character we have yet to be introduced to. With only one chapter out of seemingly 6 currently playable, we don't really know everyone we need to. It could easily be something like the owner of the company who's hiding deep in the bowels of the building who's using a loudspeaker, or someone or something with supernatural abilities who's constantly resurrecting us. And at 8, next, villains. With Huggy Wuggy seemingly meeting his end in chapter 1, we have more chapters that will be needing villains. However, who will these villains be? It's possible that these villains will be the other toys that we've seen around the facility in chapter 1. The Pink Huggy, Brawn the Dinosaur, Boogiebot, Catbee, and Candy Cat are all possibilities for the next chapters, as well as Poppy herself, who will probably be the final villain if she is one at all. More on that later. But who will be the villain of chapter 2? MatPat seems to think that it's going to be Cappy, who was the only other toy featured on more than a poster in this chapter, with the exception of Poppy herself, since we have to make a Cappy toy to move on with the game, and then that toy seemingly disappears. However, I have no idea how they plan on making Cappy scary. Like, what? It's half bee, half cat. How is that supposed to terrify me? Unless, like, I have allergies to both. Like, a Huggy already looks scary enough. Just the fact that he's like a monster, then you can just add teeth to it. But a cat and a Catbee? It doesn't really seem that freaky to me. Although I will be interested to see how they do it. And at 7, multiverse. All of these changes, however, can be explained by the concept of the Poppy Playtime multiverse. That's right, we're back here. And it's something that the trailer is seemingly hinting at as well. And it's more than just the whole Mommy and Huggy still being alive thing, since after all that, this could just be explained away with this being a prequel. But there's more to it than that. Because, like I said, there's a shot of Huggy Wuggy on the ground in a similar fashion to the Chapter 2 trailer. But this time, instead of Mommy grabbing him, the green guy does. And then he stomps him to death, and that's when things start going south. But the fact that they made this Huggy doll laying in the same position as the Chapter 2 doll seems significant to me. It seems to be trying to show us that while yes, it's the same place and the same backstory, that it's not the same events in game, or that the events of the main Poppy Playtime games don't relate to this one, which makes sense given that this could break a lot of what we think we know about Poppy Playtime currently, but it also doesn't mean that this can't help us figure out what's going on in the main series. Maybe it's like a FNAF world scenario, and it's just tied to it slightly, but not a lot, just in case. And at 6, Huggy survival. Okay, when you're put on the hook in this, I mean, when you're put in one of the holes in this game, because this isn't Dead by Daylight, you have to play the whole Huggy Wuggy minigame from Chapter 2 to stay alive until you're revived. You basically just gotta whack a bunch of Huggies in the face for as long as you can. However, my question is, why is this the thing that you're thrown into? into. Because from what we know, until chapter 2, these Huggies are on strings that pull them back if they get too close. Mommy cuts them in chapter 2 and then dies shortly thereafter, so if we're never at the location to kill her, the Huggies never get released, because she cuts them to stop us. Meaning that this shouldn't be a threat at all. My other question is, why is this what we have to fight against if this is meant to be a children's game, okay? Like, forget why the Huggies are dangerous if other events don't occur. This is established in the series as a game meant for kids. Why is this the thing that we fight for our lives in if it's meant for children? Come on, this is a very FNAF feeling sort of scenario, if you know what I mean. And also, if you're still here, hit like, okay? We might farm FNAF content, but we're not doing it anymore very much. Speaking of which, halfway through into number 5, FNAF reference? Is it just me, or does a giant gold statue of Huggy Wuggy in the center of what seems to be a play area ring any alarms for anyone else, okay? Because like, looking at this, it is a very similar layout, kind of design-wise, to Security Breach's Mega Pizzaplex, with a set of stairs on either side, and like I said, a giant statue of their mascot in the middle. And honestly, with all the questions that we've had and the comparisons we've made and all the similar elements of children becoming the toys or characters that so many love, and all the gruesomeness that comes with those implications, I don't think that this would be very much of a stretch, especially since this doesn't confirm the places or companies as the same universe, but because after all it would just be a reference. But it's still a fun little nod to no doubt a major inspiration for the series, considering how Poppy Playtime and Mob Games was created by Enchanted Mob, who's done a lot of FNAF based Minecraft animations. Of course, they didn't intend on copying or anything like that, but they were definitely just inspired by the series. So this would definitely be a nice reference, and I'm pretty sure something that was intended as such. In it for skins. The skins of the various monsters, as well as something that could have heavy implications. I mean, Huggy Wuggy has a robot skin, for God's sakes. Do you know how much that messes with me? Okay, like the original theory that we had until we figured out that people were toys was that Huggy was a robot. And that's all because sentient animatronics are always on our mind like a really old Cody Simpson song. But now, it's actually a thing that there are Huggies that are robots. Is that what this means? So yeah, does that mean that the other Huggies out there that we haven't defeated yet just might be robots that we'll have to fight in later chapters? Or is this just like a FNAF World situation where we can't be sure about it until they confirm it, and they'll only confirm it if we like the idea? Like how Multiverse of Madness was meant to just be like testing for how the audience would react to Jim Halpert as Mr. Fantastic, the return of Black Bolt and Professor X in the MCU, right? Like, is this just to test things like Boxy Boo before they're added to the main canon? Or is it closer to a special delivery thing where all of these are canon and they'll feed into the main story and we'll break everything we know about the series for like the 8th time this year? Who knows? Not me. I wish I did. Then we would get more views. Getting close to the end, and in number 3, people are toys. One of the biggest theories that I've seen that seems to be going in the right direction is that the monster toys we've been dealing with are actually humans. But not the classic humans possess these toys way, but rather they're made of human flesh and bone. These are intentionally a human monstery toy hybrid that was an attempt to recreate the success of Poppy. It's worth noting that when we take care of Huggy, he does bash his head off multiple things on the way down. However, these hits also end up leaving blood behind, and Poppy's eyes are really realistic. Now, an animatronic wouldn't leave blood behind if it's bashed its head, so that removes the possibility of these being animatronics, thank God. So the only thing that would really leave blood is an organic being with flesh. And as we learn in a moment from the trailer for the game, Huggy Wuggy has a digestive tract. When showing Poppy's voice box, it's covered and even dripping with blood. So what's the deal here? Well, the employees did disappear, right? And the game even tells us that they never left the building, so where are they? They're in the toys. What we know about the company that seems to be the main antagonist of the Poppy Playtime series, called Playtime Company, is also basically the story of the game. They seemingly hit it big in the 1960s with the release of Poppy, the world's first truly intelligent toy. This Poppy doll put them on the map, marking them as the king of toys until dolls fell out of style in the late 70s, causing Playtime Co. to have to update their repertoire and come out with newer toys like Huggy Wuggy, Candy Cat, and others. This helped them bring back some of the business they lost, but this didn't seem like enough. enough. They soon began seemingly experimenting with more realistic dolls in an attempt to recreate Poppy's success. Because let's face it, even if there was a truly intelligent version of this doll, not every version of Poppy would be truly intelligent like that, okay? Only the one they used in commercials and later that we released at the end of the chapter would actually be a person. Just like how ice cream in commercials is really mashed potatoes so it doesn't melt. However, this then brings us to the events of the tape unknown, the final tape in which, quote, final log in relation. Experiment 1006, the prototype. Coordination and cooperation is evidently within his skill set, as well as the skill set of all other experiments of his type. Though still missing, today's events are in no doubt relation to him. His absence was a flawed scientific process, which should have under no circumstances been left unaccounted for. That's why I'm making this log, so that the same mistake won't be made twice. Any future experiments will need to be contained and disposed of in a secure location. I'm not worried about myself. One breakthrough and I'll be back. We must forge onwards in the name of science, but for those who are beneath us, understand it or not. And note, despite the horrible grammar, this then caused the company to seal away their experiments in an underground bunker, which we seemingly explore in chapter 1. At least, hopefully that's the thing we explore, otherwise they didn't do that and we're all screwed. But is this something that we all really see happening in real life? From my research, I couldn't really find anything. And Mob Games is also claiming that any similarities to other entities is purely coincidental and subconscious, so any real life inspiration also seems to be out the window. However, we can tackle this much like we did the What If Bendy and the Ink Machine Was Real video, where we look to see if there's any company that seems like it would be willing to do these kinds of things. Usually, I'd say Disney, but they aren't really in the toy business all that much. They only use that market to capitalize on the popularity of their characters, which is understandable if you're a corporation who doesn't care about their employees and just wants money. But are there really any toy companies in this same situation that can benefit from turning their employees into living toys to get back on the map? The biggest toy company you can probably think of is Hasbro, and it's understandable why. They seem to be basically everywhere. However, in 1991, they acquired a particular company called Kenner Products. Simply known as Kenner, they were an American toy company founded in 1946. Throughout its history, the Kenner brand produced several highly recognizable toys and merchandise lines, including action figures like the original Star Wars characters, Jurassic Park, Batman, as well as die-cast models. The company, however, was closed by Hasbro in 2000. Well, the year 2000. However, being acquired by Tonga in 1987, who were honestly more about trucks and vehicles, when Kenner was more of an action figure company, would certainly be considered the beginning of the end. And with the characters they made being so popular, they would certainly benefit from being able to claim that these toys are sentient, or the world's first truly intelligent toys. So he'd be a higher up at the company, and not the top because he wouldn't want all that attention, and it would probably have been his idea to try and recreate the success of Poppy with new toys, since his goal of bringing his children, or at least the crying one, back would kind of still need to be there for this character to make sense. Like I was explaining earlier, he kind of need to have that, otherwise it's not William, it's just some guy. Although everything associated with the pizzeria in his story could just be a separate entity within the Poppy Playtime world. As a reasonable extension of William being the one who suggests these experiments, I'm also going to be guessing he's the one conducting them, since if nobody can do it right, you gotta do it yourself when it comes to creating human toys. That sounds weird. This then leads him to create Experiment 1006 that then escapes, like we see during the events of Poppy Playtime Chapter 1. So Afton's voice would be the one that we heard on the tapes. This would probably mean that he's actually dead, because, you know. But no. So instead, since he knew about the risks, he would take those into consideration and would probably have a backup plan if anyone or anything ended up going haywire. probably something that turned himself into a toy or something similar to give him enhanced strength and stamina, as well as just keep him alive longer, no longer needing to eat and sleep. Thus, Springtrap is born. Well, the Springtrap that would be in this universe. So here, Springtrap wouldn't really be an animatronic suit that Afton got spring locked in, but rather the toy that Afton would have turned himself into. Willingly, might I add. But they'd still remain largely the same, since both have Afton's organic body inside them, yet still enhancing it in some way. So after we knock down Huggy Wuggy, we go to release Poppy, thus ending the first chapter. My idea would be that this is actually what William wanted all along. Or maybe not what he wanted specifically, but something that would draw him out. Knowing that the only true working human toy hybrid is actually out and has been released from its prison would certainly entice the man that just wants to use this technology to bring back his son to come out. So in chapter 2, if William was in Poppy Playtime, he could reasonably be the villain that we'd be fighting. Experiment 1007, if you will. So he'd come after Poppy so that he could study her and make sure he knows how to bring his son back. Well, maybe. However, he would soon learn that the secret to recreating Poppy was that the person becoming the toy would have to be willing to do so, like Poppy's human and William were. Yeah, because William willingly turned himself into a toy to survive Huggy, he's also one of these perfect human toy hybrids, meaning that to become a toy, the person would have to be alive, which would send William spiraling and probably turn him into the Springtrap we all know and love, but also hate. For me, mostly hate. He needs to die. Hell, you know what? Just for literary significance, he may even just set fire to the Playtime Co. facility just out of anger. Because honestly, that would make sense given the history of this character in the other franchise. We'd obviously end up surviving this fire though, and Springtrap would later become the main antagonist, while we spent our time fighting off the other experiments that escaped. So we'd have 5 additional chapters, at least after chapter 2, where we'd fight experiments 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, and 1005, assuming that that's the scheme that they'd be going with. But the whole time, we'd wonder why Afton didn't kill us directly, and instead just tried to crash the building down on us, which in reality gave us plenty of time to escape, which would also be a big mystery of the game and the ongoing chapters. He could have had us by the throat and then let go to run away. And we wouldn't know until the final chapter that the reason is because we are either Afton's child or the toy of one of his kids, which is why he released us and gave us a chance to leave, resulting in a final battle between father and son where he realized that it's him or us, meaning he doesn't care if we're his son. He's seen how fragile this form can be and is now in the form of Springtrap known as Scraptrap. We end the fight by burning down the building with us inside as well, alluding to FNAF 6, killing all of us, or at least it seems that way, because, you know, he always comes back. In the final chapter, we get one final scene of something crawling out of the burnt down ruins of whatever warehouse we were in that stored all the Playtime Co. toys. And as we zoom in, we see bunny ears. And the most recent form of Springtrap, Burntrap, emerges from the rubble, and the scene cuts to black. Poppy Playtime may be over, but Burntrap's playtime is just beginning. That sounds kind of creepy, considering how he wants to lure kids to the back of pizza joints.